The phrase that I've heard you use that I love the idea of. It'd be good to hear your take on it. Live long, die fast, and what you mean by that.
Our healthcare system and the technology we have, we're really good at keeping people alive. We're not really good at keeping people healthy. They live long and they die slowly. But then when you build your capacity and you increase your reserve, you maintain your health over a longer period of time. And what that looks like is we live long, but we die fast.
It reminded me of a quote, if you think lifting weights is dangerous, try being weak is dangerous.
There's a lot of people where the demands of their life are near or exceeding their true maximum capacity. So the fitter, the stronger I can get them, the easier their life becomes.
Welcome back to the Never Told to Live podcast, and today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Dustin Jones, who I've been following for a long time. And rather than me give a bit of an explanation of who you are, I thought I'd let you with that first question is who are you, what is it you do, and how can you help some of the audience at Never Told to Lift?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I've been an admirer from afar as well, from the States, and I think we're definitely in the same line of work of we're trying to really help people. My background is in physical therapy or physiotherapy, and I've had a lot of experience mainly in geriatrics or, working with older adults, folks over 65. And most of my experience is in the context of the home setting. So doing home health, going into people's homes, and just the vast majority of a lot of the issues that people were facing were preventable. There's a lot of preventable suffering. And that really led me to see the power of lifting, of exercise, of being more proactive with our health and with our abilities to make the rest of our lives a little bit easier. And so that's led me to own and operate a physical therapy clinic and gym for folks over 60 called Hyphen. And I teach continuing education as well to other physios and occupational therapists about working with older adults.
Amazing. So yeah, I hadn't realised you'd started more as the home health side of things and going into people's homes. I suppose we'll probably come on to that a little bit later in terms of how people can get started at home. But have you found there's a big difference between people and their approach to, or the approach you take with someone trying to teach them in a home setting compared to the gym?
In terms of differences, like how?
Yeah, because a lot of people, a common objection I hear to people who want to start strength training is they don't want to go to a gym, they don't have access to a gym, so therefore I can't do it. Is that true, or have you managed to kind of get around that?
Yeah. So in the context of home health, when I'm going into someone's home, in the context of our U.S. healthcare system, they are considered to be homebound. So that's a considerable or taxing effort to leave. So a lot of these folks, it's not necessarily in the cards for them to go out to a gym or a fitness facility, for example. And so in that setting, it was a lot of troubleshooting, of showing how we can load, how you can perform some of this resistance training in the context of your home, using the maybe household supplies or equipment that you have. And so there were a lot of folks that were able to see opportunities around them that did not require, getting a gym membership and going and loading up a barbell, even though I love that, right? But maybe going out into the garage, maybe finding some, big totes or laundry baskets so we can load up with, cans of beans or different, heavier objects to be able to do some deadlifts or some carries that you can get pretty creative in the home. So there's some different things I think folks can do to make it more accessible. Obviously, would love for folks to get to a gym or have some type of gym set up in the home. But for a lot of folks I worked with, that wasn't going to be a reality for them. So we had to troubleshoot a lot of scenarios.
And I found through doing this, a lot of people start with that mindset of they don't like the gym, never going to go to the gym, get started at home. And a lot of people do is if they don't have any small dumbbells even or any small equipment, I often use a backpack with some bottles of water in, and we know the volume of water, we know the weight of it, and it's enough to get people confident with the exercises first, and then all they've got to then do is transition their exercises and their workout program from their setting at home into a gym setting. And a lot of people actually then embrace a gym and don't want to do anything else but the gym, and wouldn't even consider it at home again. Because actually one of the things we'll come on to now is I was looking through a list of things that you've had on one of your websites of all the benefits of strength training, and it's all the obvious I say obvious ones. It's the ones that I talk a lot of increased bone density, increased balance and coordination, mental health, and a lot of those type of things. But I love the one you put at the end was make friends and have fun. And again, people working out at home don't often get that element of it. And how important do you feel that is?
Oh, that's huge. I mean, when I worked in home health, I mean, you would see the implications of that constantly, of folks that were physically unable to leave the home and what that did to them in terms of their lack of social interactions, lack of friendships, lack of connection, and what that did to their quality of life is hard to deny. And then you throw on top of that the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was a lot of forced closures of activities and people had to isolate. That I think the older adult demographic was impacted more than any other group of folks. And so it has huge implications. And when we can connect with other people, peers, and we have that shared struggle where we're going through something really difficult together, like it creates bonds that I think can snowball the benefits of a fitness program, in the sense of I'm going to feel tied to a community. I'm probably going to be going a little bit more consistently because I want to see my friends, or I know I'm going to have someone that holds me accountable. That community also encourages one another to push themselves and see what they're truly capable of doing. And what I would see in the context of our gym is that people would try hobbies that they may have not tried before, or things that they used to do maybe 30, 40 years ago that they absolutely love. That they are like, hey, I'm going to get back on that bike. I'm going to get in that kayak. I'm going to learn, how to get back up on that horse again. And so there's a lot of kind of secondary benefits as well to the community piece. But friends go a long way from the fitness standpoint, and just goes a long way from the health standpoint as well.
Yeah, and I was saying before we hit record that you know Betsy, who we had on the podcasts a month or two ago, and as I said, she put us in touch with Mary and Linda, who were part of her class, or who still are part of her class, and they both admit they would never go to the gym on their own and keep this up, but they go together, having known each other for a long time. But now they are going to the class, and when Mary couldn't go for a while, Linda was surprised that she kept going every week, because she still had this group that supported her, and they all were asking how Mary was after having had a period of illness, and they cared for each other, and they spurred each other on, and it's that accountability. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, not just older adults, anyone, right, that's looking to work out, I think we have to be very honest with ourselves and critical of our ability to have a consistent fitness habit outside of the context of a community. It takes a very, very special person to work out by themselves regularly and achieve the appropriate intensity and really push themselves and get the results that they could get. And I'm saying this as someone that mainly works out at home by myself, or with my partner, or with my friends. But if engineering community, bringing other people into your fitness routine, is automatically going to likely improve the odds of you getting the results that you're wanting to get. It's a very hard road to go alone.
And I don't want to sort of take too much time on this part, but I suppose another objection I hear about gyms is the fear or the assumption that it's just a lot of young guys, or there's more younger people doing it now, but there's a lot of fear that people going to be judged, particularly the older generations going into it, particularly if they haven't had familiarity with the exercises before. Do you find that gyms have changed, and that's still a thing, or do you think gyms are actually far more supportive environments than people give them credit for?
That's a good question, and I think I think there are very judgmental gyms that are not welcoming to new people. But for every gym that I would not feel comfortable walking in, there's probably two or three or four gyms that are welcoming, that are going to cheer you on, that are going to accept you as you are. And so obviously there is a lot of variability amongst that, but by and large, the fitness industry is growing tremendously and becoming way more accepting and encouraging. And there's a lot more diverse types of bodies and ages in group classes or in different open gyms and different models. That and I can mainly speak to the context here in the U.S., but it is definitely a more inviting environment than the stereotype. What I always tell folks that I'll talk to about, what should I look for in a gym? Because, we've built a gym solely for folks over 60. There's no one under 60 that's going to be in there other than maybe the staff. And so we've made a lot of intentional decisions about what that looks like, the design, the music, the exercises, our programming, everything. But there's not facilities like that, right, in other parts of the country or parts of the world that can be kind of hard to find. And so, what I always tell people is if you are going to join a gym, I want you to look at their pictures, go on their social media, their Facebook, their Instagram, and who do you see? Do you only see the 28-year-old shirtless dude or the 33-year-old, female that's wearing a bathing suit, basically, right? Like, what do you see? Do you see people like you in some of that media? And if you do, go for it. If you don't, I would probably maybe just try a free class and see for yourself. But that's a really good filter because the representation that people will put out online is usually pretty accurate of who they are and who they're trying to serve.
Coming back onto some of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about is, and like I said, I've been following you for a while, and there's a few terms that you often use or phrases that I just wanted to introduce to my listeners, but also give you a chance to kind of elaborate on it. And I suppose they all come back to the importance of strength training and why people should be doing it. But the first one is that 1 rep max living, and that to me makes a lot of sense. But for someone who might not even know what we really mean by 1 rep max, and then what does 1 rep max living mean, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the term 1 rep max. So if someone, let's say if you're a listener or viewer and you're going to lift as much weight off the ground as possible, we'd call that a deadlift. And you try and figure out how much you can lift off the ground. Like, what is your true maximum capacity? That would be your 1 rep max or your 1 RM. And in our world, in a lot of our physical therapy and strength and conditioning research, when looking at the effectiveness of strength training, a lot of the programs that you'll see in these articles will use a percentage of your 1 rep max to dose the exercise. And so you'll see a program that may use, 5 sets of 5 reps of an exercise at 80 to 85% of your 1 RM. So this term is very prevalent in our world, right? Physical therapy, strength and conditioning. But what's really interesting is when you look at someone's maximum capacity, if they are relatively deconditioned or weak, or they haven't been strength training, a lot of very common tasks can be a high percentage of their 1 rep max, meaning that it takes a lot of relative effort. There's one study, and I can send you a link after this, that's really interesting. And I'm not going to go too into detail, but it is a very eye-opening study that really highlights this point. And what this study did is they took healthy, very healthy older adults that didn't have a lot or hardly any health conditions. They were very, very healthy individuals. And they also took some college kids and they tested their 1 rep max. They basically saw what their maximum capacity was when they went upstairs, when they went downstairs, and when they got up from a chair. They had this little sticker that they put on your thigh muscle that can read kind of the electrical activity of how much your muscle is working to do that task. It's called an EMG. And so they determined what their max capacity was, and then they had them go upstairs, downstairs, and out of a chair. And they compared the healthy older adults to the college kids. The college kids, when they were going upstairs, downstairs, up out of a chair, they were using around 40% of their max capacity, of their maximum effort. Not much. The healthy older adults were using 75, 80, 85% of their maximum capacity to do these very common tasks. And if you've ever lifted those percentages and you think about how many times you get out of a chair a day, right? Which is dozens of times. Can you imagine doing 80 and 85% of your max effort, lift dozens of times throughout a day? Like, it's absolutely exhausting, so fatiguing, and it's probably going to influence what you choose to do or what you choose not to do. Oh, I'm sorry, Betty, I can't meet you out for lunch. I'm pretty tired. Or, oh, I'm not going to go to, church later. Oh, I'm not going to go to the grocery store like I need to. And so what that study really showed me when I first read it is like, man, these healthy individuals, very fit older adults, are giving that much energy to do these common tasks. What is everyone else doing? Like, what are the patients I'm seeing that are in the home? What about these folks that are just starting to exercise that have a lot of conditions on board? Like, how much effort are they putting? And it was really eye-opening for me. And that really shows me of, all right, there's a lot of people walking out in the community that are quote unquote one rep max living, where the demands of their life are near or exceeding their true maximum capacity. And so, me as a physical therapist, as a strength coach as well, if I can get them stronger, if I can get them fitter, then that lowers their relative demand of what life is going to ask of them. So the fitter, the stronger I can get them, the easier their life becomes. And that is one rep max living.
Yeah, I suppose I'd because I was looking at it more from the side of, by building their one rep max through targeted strength training, we then create more of a buffer. But I hadn't quite considered it, actually, the thought process of you're making everyday life a lot easier, and therefore having space to then move into more demanding things. And like I say, those people who had hobbies in the past that they want to get back to, I can imagine when you're working 85% max to get up out of a chair and go up a flight of stairs, the thought of trying to get on the golf course or going to play doubles tennis or anything similar is just not appealing at all. But
yeah, and it's both though, right? I mean, you're spot on. It does build a buffer in the sense of, if something happens, like if I have an injury or a fall or I'm exposed to some type of illness, I've got more of a buffer to where it's not going to impact me as much. I'm going to be more resilient. I've got more reserve. Um, so that definitely still applies. But when I talk to most folks, the making life easier, making these tasks easier is what can really resonate with them. But more from the healthcare side, I'm thinking along the lines of building reserve or a buffer and making these folks more resilient. And what's interesting is this concept of if we build strength or capacity, we can lower relative demand. There's more reserve or buffer, so they're more resilient. That applies to almost any system in our body. And the COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted this with, remember, like early on, April, May 2020, the narrative around, who needs to be worried about COVID-19, it was older folks. If you're over 65, like, beware, right? And then as we progress through the pandemic and we observe this and see who's really being impacted more, who's going on the ventilator, not coming off of it, as we get more data, you start to see, oh, it's older adults, but it's more so the folks that aren't fit or unhealthy or have metabolic conditions, so on and so forth. And those individuals don't have as much of a buffer they get exposed to COVID-19, they're not as resilient and they're going to be more impacted. The folks that were fitter, that were healthier, that did not have a lot of those metabolic conditions, um, but yet still quote unquote old, they get exposed to the virus. They're not impacted as much. They have more of a buffer. They're more resilient to it. And so that kind of theme you can find kind of across the body, different organ systems, tissue health as well. And so, as for us as providers, and then for the listeners, like our job is to get people as fit as possible, increase their capacity, and you can make them more resilient in so many ways, in their life.
And again, it's just a bit eye-opening for me there in terms of anyone wanting to maybe do something if they've not been particularly interested in strength training before. They can see the importance of it, the difference in motivation of the way that I talk about it a lot is to make your future self healthier and improve those years later on versus making life easier now. And I think that's a big difference is people, if you can make a difference to your life now and an improvement, you're far more likely to feel inspired to start. Whereas doing things, if things you're coping now, it's harder to envisage what my life might be like, because we normally just wait till things are hard before we actually do something about it.
Yeah. And what I love about that is the folks that are the most deconditioned or have never exercised before, those are actually the folks that are going to see the most improvement as quickly as possible compared to the fit, healthy individual that's been exercising for a long time. The amount of work that they have to put in to get significant change is substantial, right? Because they've been doing the habit, and it takes a lot for them to continue to improve. But man, if I've never exercised and I'm thinking about it, and yeah, I've never done that before, like I'm going and I pick up exercise and strength training, I'm going to see very significant improvements in a very short period of time. And going back to like when I worked in the home, that could be the difference between someone being able to live in their home and not. That could be the difference between them being able to get out of their bed alone or off the toilet alone versus needing help. And so, if anybody is going to pick this up, strength training, exercising, the folks that are the most, deconditioned, they stand to gain the most from that intervention. And I think we need to realize that, because most of the folks, here's what I hear a lot, especially for folks who want to come to the gym. Oh, I need to get fit to do that. I need to get fitter before I come. And that could not be more false. Like come as you are. And the less fit you are, the more you're going to get out of it. In terms of, that quick change.
Definitely. And that's the exact reason I ended up kind of coming down this route and finding my interest in working with older adults, and in particular with the strength training, is because when I used to work with sports teams, like the amount of effort you put in and that 1% gain, they don't even notice. You might notice it, but don't get any thanks for it. And then, yeah, you may do exactly the same thing with someone who's never done it before. And yeah, the realization that they can do things they thought they couldn't do, and say what it adds to the life is amazing. And yeah, for anyone listening, if you've not experienced that yet, say it's those early changes can be quite dramatic, in a good way.
100%, man.
Second phrase that I've heard you use that I love the idea of. It initially might sound a bit controversial and scary, but it'd be good to hear your kind of take on it. But is the live long, die fast, and what you mean by that?
I worked in a skilled nursing facility, and this is before I started working in home health. So in the context of US, you'll hear them called nursing homes. I'm not sure what would be the UK equivalent.
Yeah, nursing home is generally the
nursing home.
Yeah.
So I was working in a nursing home, and I had a patient on my caseload who was 37 years old, and he'd been through the ringer. He had a lot of issues, physical, social, mental health issues as well. But he was in this skilled nursing facility requiring a lot of assistance to get out of his bed. He couldn't walk, so he was in a wheelchair. He was 37. And our healthcare system and the technology we have, we're really good at keeping people alive. We're not really good at keeping people healthy. So that guy, he's 37 in that nursing home. And I just saw it about, my gosh, he has such a long runway that he's going to live probably a relatively long life. But the amount of disability that he's experiencing and suffering is so long. And you'd see this a lot in the healthcare system, is that people, they live long and they die slowly. They are suffering for decades upon decades with different disabilities and different ailments. But we are really good at keeping people alive, but not necessarily maintaining their health and their capacity. But then when you build your capacity, right, like we talked about with One Rep Max Living, and you increase your reserve, you increase your resiliency, you maintain your health over a longer period of time. What you'll see in the research, you'll hear this called the compression of morbidity, where the amount of time that we experience the impact of different diseases is compressed or shortened when we're healthier, when we're fitter. And what that looks like is we live long, but we die fast. We lose our abilities quickly. And when I think about how I want to live and how many people want to live, like, I don't want to go down slowly. Like, I want to live as long and healthy as possible. And when it's time to go, I want it to be as fast as possible. and and so this whole concept of live long, die fast is kind of a mantra that um, that we like to promote in our training. Like, this is what we're training for, when so many people have seen the opposite. And I experience that in healthcare, and I have lots of members and patients that have maybe experienced that with their parents, that they've seen their parents' health decline for such a long period of time. It's just really, really hard to watch. There's a lot of suffering that, man, if we can make that period of decline shorter, but we maintain like a long length of life, that's a pretty good way to go.
I, a couple of weeks ago, did a little piece on Peter Attia's book, Outlive, and he talks about this concept of steepening the curve, and it's exactly the same thing. Is rather than from kind of the age of 50 having that gradual decline, it's keeping that strength, the fitness, aerobic capacity high for as long as possible before the sudden drop off.
Yeah, same concept.
And then the last one, and I think you warned me you could talk on this one for quite a while, is I loved your differentiation, because falls prevention is something that's talked about quite a lot, and strength links in with that. But I like how you flipped it around, and instead of falls prevention, it's falls preparedness. So again, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Falls prevention for like healthcare providers, it's something that is talked about so much. And we've spent billions upon billions of dollars in the realm of research to learn about how to reduce the rates of falls and risk of falls. And we really haven't made significant progress. And so this concept, like focusing so much on preventing the fall, we may have some misguided attention, especially when you think about how often people fall, regardless of age, right? It's like, if you're a viewer or listener, like, I just want you to think about the last time you fell. And a fall technically it's an inadvertent lowering to the ground or other lower level. So like, if I end up falling backwards, but I land safely in my bed or a couch, it was an inadvertent lowering. That's still a fall. So a fall is not always this dramatic, crash to the ground. And the reality is, many of us fall. A lot of us do, regardless of age. Like, I mean, my 4-year-old falls at least 35 times a day. I've fallen, twice in the past month, trail running and then tripping on a Lego set. So falls are, I would dare to say, somewhat normal. The big variable is my resilience to a fall, is what happens when I fall. How does it impact me? And when you look at the data, that's what gets people, is if they have an injurious fall where they fracture a hip, an arm, hit their head, so on and so forth. And it impacts their lives dramatically, right? And so, yes, we want to prevent a fall, but I think we also need to make people more resilient to a fall or prepare them for a fall. So, from prevention to preparedness. Now, what does that look like, right? So, the way we like to think about falls, there's 4 phases to a fall: pre-fall, near fall, fall landing, and then completed fall. So pre-fall, this is when we're walking. We're doing whatever. We haven't lost our balance yet. I want to make sure in that pre-fall phase, if I'm really strong, if I do have good balance, right, that lowers my odds of progressing to the next phase. So the strength training I'm doing, right, the deadlifts that you all are hopefully doing if you listen to this podcast, they're helping you in that pre-fall phase and hopefully preventing progression to the next phase or preventing a fall. The second phase is that near fall phase. So when I have lost my balance, what is your capacity to regain that balance? We do this through different balance strategies. So if I lose my balance, a common one that we'll use is a step. So I'll take a quick step to maintain my balance. Do you have the strength to do that? Do you have the quickness to do that as well? The better my capacity or ability in that phase, the greater the likelihood of preventing myself from going to the next phase of actually falling. So when we talk falls prevention, and most people are like balance programs and strength training and all that type of stuff, it's usually influencing those first 2 phases the most. And we'll kind of put that in the category of falls prevention, the pre-fall and near fall. Then we get to the third phase. So let's say I wasn't able to regain my balance. My stepping strategy didn't work. So I've progressed. So I'm actually falling. Oh no. Oh crap. What's going to happen? Right. There's certain strategies to fall in a manner that is going to lower your risk of injury. And this is where the martial arts, for example, parkour as well, like some of these other disciplines are very, very good at teaching people how to fall well without getting hurt. And so there's some different principles that are more suited to videos and actually practicing them with a professional than trying to talk through them. But you can fall in a manner that lowers your risk of injury. Also, if I strength train a lot and I've got that bone mineral density, like you've talked about, that's also going to lower my risk of an injury if I fall. So that's the third phase. And then the fourth phase, completed fall. How can we get up from the ground? There are different strategies to do that, and we should practice them. We should be doing burpees regularly, or if I need a piece of furniture, having strategies to where I can get up from the ground consistently. And so, as a professional, I think about those 4 phases and how I can make people better in those 4 phases and improving their resiliency, if you will. And so by exposing people to a fall, showing them what to do if they do have a fall, we can prepare them in the event of a fall and make them more resilient to it. Now, all that being said, I think one of the biggest benefits to focusing on those 4 phases is the confidence piece. There's a lot of fear around falling. It impacts our balance as well. And if I'm someone that hasn't been on the ground for years or decades, right, I'm going to have a lot of fear about probably walking because I want to make sure that I don't lose my balance and end up on the ground because I don't know if I can get up without calling 911, right? And so there's a lot of fear that can influence a lot of the things that we do. It may limit me, going to a particular restaurant that I love because there's this one curve that I'm really concerned about. And so exposing people and practicing this, if you're a viewer or listener, can help build your confidence that can then influence your ability and performance in other areas, overall lifting your confidence in what you can and can't do. And I think that is probably the biggest variable that I see the folks I work with is their confidence improves, and that has this huge ripple effect. But that is falls preparedness. 4 phases of a fall, and we want to focus on all 4: the pre-fall, near fall, completed fall, or sorry, fall landing, and then completed fall.
Because, like you say, there's a lot around those first 2 phases through what we already do. And then I talk a lot about the completed fall phase in terms of, particularly over here, for a fall that's not sort of urgent and someone's just on the floor, the ambulance isn't not their priority. And how overrun they are at the moment, quite often it's not unknown for a several-hour wait before anyone gets to them.
Oh, wow.
And so I often talk about, just that ability to practice getting on off the floor, and I say having that strategy is huge, because I talk about a lot that people often don't know that they can't do it until it happens, because they've realised they haven't been on the floor for years. They don't want to necessarily practice it through fear of getting stuck on the floor or fear of looking ungainly in front of someone else, so they never practice it, and then it's only the time they actually fall that they suddenly realise they can't get up. But I'll admit I've not done a huge amount on the fall landing side of things. Is that something you work on in the clinic? And I know it, like you say, it's a little bit hard to explain some of it without showing visually, but is there anything like a simple beginner drill in that sort of sense that they could work on?
Yeah, and I'll share some videos too, like some Instagram
that'd be
posts.
great, and I can link to those.
So what usually gets people when I start talking about how to fall and getting up from the ground is, most people are going to think of like a full fall, like from full standing to the ground, like, holy crap, I can't do that. All of these things can be scaled or modified to someone's level. So when I'm teaching, first off, I don't start with teaching someone how to fall. I start with that completed fall phase. Can you get up from the ground? And so that may not mean getting to the ground. That may mean going from standing to like an elevated therapy mat table, for example, or a bed, of going from standing to quadruped or on my hands and knees, and then working on getting on my belly, and then coming back up on my hands and knees, and then coming back up to standing. Okay, if we do well there, all right, now let's use the bed and maybe get down on your knees on the ground, and then work our hands down to the ground, get in on our belly, and then come back up. So using different furniture and surfaces to make sure we can get to and from the ground. All right, we check that box. All right, now let's practice how to fall. I usually start with a backwards fall because it's very approachable for a lot of folks, and you can use a lot of key principles that translate to whatever direction you're using. And so I won't start in standing. We'll probably sit on the edge of a bed or a therapy mat table. And so I'm sitting and I'm going to roll backwards. There's some key principles for falling. The first and most important one is protecting our head. That is a very impactful, no pun intended, injury, if I do have a head injury related to a fall. And so if I'm falling backwards, I'm tucking my chin. So we'll practice that. We'll roll backwards, and I'm making sure that I'm not reaching back and falling on an outstretched hand, or you'll hear this called a foosh injury, that we want to roll on our back and then spread out our body to lower the impact that we experience. So I'm not leading with my hands. I'm actually letting my back roll, and I'm tucking my chin, and then I'm spreading out. And if I have some successful repetitions, and it feels, like, okay, I'm getting more confident in this, then I'll just increase that range of motion. So in this scenario, instead of sitting on the bed, I may stand up a little bit. So my backwards fall goes up just a tiny bit. Get some successful reps. All right, let's make that a little bit greater. Stand up a little bit taller. Or if I'm in a clinic, I could lower the mat table. So increasing that range of motion. So that's what it would look like for like a backwards fall, for example. The forward fall, it'd be very similar. I would start on a bed on hands and knees and work on some basic principles. How do I protect my head if I fall forward? Well, I may not be able to, look up. I may have to rotate my head and look to the side. I may not want to land with my outstretched hands or have that foosh. I may want to think about using the meat of my forearms or the muscle of my forearms to lower myself, because I'm going to be stronger there than having to do like a push up, for example. And so if I'm able to use those principles in the very kind of lower short range of motion, then I can increase it. So I can maybe go into a crouched position and, work my way up to full standing. What's really important with the practicing is the obviously the surface. So a really good thing to have is like the real thick kind of gymnastic mats, or rock climbers. Like they have those bouldering pads that they'll carry out, in the woods, and those are really good as well. It's like some kind of padding makes this a whole lot more approachable. And the research is really interesting because they've done these interventions and actually measured people's ability to fall through like how much impact force did they experience. And even one session of practicing some of these drills can benefit you when you fall. So it's something that we probably want to practice regularly, but even if you get exposed to it and get, one solid session, it can have lasting impacts, up to 9 to 12 months based on the current studies. So I think it's definitely worth trying at least once, because you'll definitely get a benefit from that.
Great, and like I say, I'll link the videos so people can properly visualize it first before they they give it a go. How do you then incorporate that into your programming? And that might be a nice sort of segue into talking a little bit about how someone listening who's in those early stages of strength training, and again, always feel like when I'm talking about strength training, it almost feels like neglecting the Falls Preparedness and the balance work, and Betsy will talk to us about including some high interval training in there. And say someone's only got time for 2 to 3 30-minute sessions per week, like what do you think the important things to focus on, and how to incorporate enough of everything to actually have a well comprehensive program that will help them moving forwards?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if they're doing a couple 2 to 3 sessions a week, 20, 30 minutes, I would try and shoot to get on the ground and up from the ground at least once a week. So work that into one of your sessions. And it could be, let's say you're doing 5 sets of 5 reps of your heavy deadlifts. Well, maybe you do those deadlifts and then maybe a little bit of rest after that first set of 5 reps. Maybe you throw in a couple backwards falls, for example, or forward fall, or maybe a burpee, for example, that you could kind of superset or combine those and throw that in, even with the same number of reps and sets that you would do with like your deadlift. With a lot of the falling, it's more of like the practice, getting the habit, kind of what we would call the motor learning side of it. And so I don't think you should do a ton of repetitions, like 20, backwards falls, right? Like you're probably going to get pretty sore and that's not going to be a great experience, but just getting, a few reps can go a really, really long way. So I would just combine it with whatever you're doing. If you're doing, heavy deadlifts, maybe, wait 30 seconds, for example, and then throw in, a few of those falls just to get some repetitions there. But I would say shoot for one time a week. You're getting to and from the ground.
And then you mentioned there about maybe supersetting it with some deadlifts. And for anyone who doesn't know, supersetting, it's kind of, you do one set of one exercise, and then whilst your muscles are recovering, you do another exercise that's slightly different, and then repeat those. You mentioned deadlifts there. Is there any sort of movement patterns or exercises that you think are a must in a program?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my thoughts have changed a lot about this over the years. But deadlifts are huge, I feel. loaded carries are so practical and have there's so many instances in our lives where we need to be able to carry heavy things for a long period of time. Um, and then where I've changed a lot over the past several years, the Olympic lifts, particularly the clean, and maybe not the jerk, but just getting something overhead. So a clean meaning where you take a weight from the ground up to your shoulders, and then being able to press that overhead. Usually you may use what you call a push press, where you dip down a little bit so you can use your legs to lift that weight overhead. Um, there the power development there in terms of my ability to produce force and move quickly is so beneficial, and I just see so many folks that don't have that type of stimulus in their life. Like, they may be getting really really strong, but they're not always moving weight quickly, and we need to be able to move quick in a lot of scenarios, like that near fall phase, like I just talked about with the stepping strategy, for example. So a clean can be a very quick movement that can help you get a weight from the ground up to your shoulder. That's also really practical in lots of ways. And then the push press of being able to get a weight up, like your dishes up into the cabinet, reaching up into the closet. A very common one that has been impactful for a lot of folks that I work with is, we'll do a retreat once a year. So we'll take a group around 20, 25 folks to a resort in the Dominican Republic. And it's a health wellness retreat. We do different sessions related to exercise and health, and just have a lot of activities that a lot of these folks would typically not do, like riding horseback on a beach, kayaking in the ocean, for example. We'll do some self-defense classes, on the beach, like all kinds of stuff. And one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of folks that I work with in traveling is managing the airport and their luggage. The long walks, the having to walk quickly, but then also having to carry the bags and then get the carry on in the overhead bin. And I didn't realize how much of a barrier this was for a lot of folks and how anxiety provoking it was. And so all of us were on the same flight, and I sat down first and I started filming. I got this video on Instagram, but my members would come in, they had their carry on, they would clean it. So take that carry on from the ground up to their shoulder, and then they would use the push press that we practice in class, dip down, use their legs to launch that thing up overhead into the overhead bin. And every single person just started beaming with a smile, and everyone behind them just started clapping and just cheering them on. There were so many individuals on that flight that were trying to offer help, like, oh, let me get that for you, assuming that they could not do it. And they proved that person wrong and proved them to themselves what they truly can do. And all that to say, I think practicing that movement, clean and press, is one that's often neglected that can be really impactful for folks.
And I suppose with clean and press, and I've been guilty of not incorporating it as much as maybe I was liked, and that's been changing recently as well. But I'd love to hear your take on, is that a movement pattern that you do? Is there a sort of a criteria they have to reach before they can attempt that, or is it because you're starting so light, like you are with everything else, you can bring it in very early on and then just increase as you feel their confidence is there and the technique's there to do it?
Yeah, super early on. I wouldn't worry, about having certain prereqs to do the movement. I mean, go light, work on that, the skill of that movement, because the big thing that is challenging for a lot of folks is they think, oh, I'm bringing it up to my shoulder, and they use a lot of their arms. And what the clean, especially a heavy clean or heavy enough, teaches us is that how we can use our legs and the rest of our body to get that weight up to our shoulders, so we don't have to rely on our arms, because our legs are so much stronger. And so we'll start light, and if they're not comfortable with it, we may not start from the ground, but we may go from like a hang position where the weight is around their knees. We often use dumbbells, but barbells are obviously great. Sandbags. We don't often do kettlebells. With kettlebell cleans are amazing, but with a lot of folks I work with, that is a rather technical movement in the sense of if you don't do the form correctly, then the bell will often kind of hit on the back of the wrist and can cause some bruising and whatnot. So um, I love them, and I think people should do those. But from a beginner standpoint, like a dumbbell or barbell, I think is the way to go. And then we'll progress the weight. I will progress the weight if I am noticing that they are using more of their arms and not as much of their legs. That oftentimes I can give them a heavier weight to where they can't just lift it with their arms and they have to use their legs. So the heavier weight can be really instructive um, for individuals learning that skill.
And then the other one I wanted to kind of clarify a bit more is the loaded carries. Firstly, the first part of the question will be, for someone who doesn't know what a loaded carry means, what you mean by that. But also, the other question I get quite a lot is, with a deadlift or a squat, it's quite obvious doing, say, 5-8 reps, feeling like you're at the 1 to 2 reps in reserve. It's a bit easier to kind of feel that. What's your normal recommendation with a loaded carry in terms of, is it a number of steps? Is it a time frame? How do you kind of get that same level of intensity as you might do for when you're instructing repetitions on a deadlift?
Yeah, good question. So oftentimes when I'm programming loaded carries, it's usually like a superset with another movement, or it's not necessarily done in isolation. You're doing it with other activities. But if you are doing deadlifts and squats, for example, and you're being relatively calculated of maybe your percentages or maybe even your rating of perceived exertion, like how hard that is, I will often use that to kind of correlate. So let's say you're doing a heavy set of 5 reps at 85% of your 1 rep max in a deadlift, and you know what that feels like. Like by that 5th rep, you're giving it a 9, 10 out of 10 effort. So how you feel in that scenario, let's go for that. And so based on the goal, like if it's just strength and building bone mineral density, we may go for a shorter distance or time period, and we're trying to go as heavy as we can. Let's use the retreat, that example I just used, where a group of folks are going to a retreat. They have to travel through 2 airports. They have to go from one end of the airport to the other. There's a lot of more endurance based, activities. So we may go for longer distance, longer time, and therefore we'd probably need to lighten the load. But by the end of that distance or period of time, that load should feel really heavy. It should feel that 9 out of 10 effort. And so I will manipulate the distance and the weight, but how long based on whatever their goal is. I think for most folks that I work with, it's usually a longer duration. So it's usually like a trip or some type of, carrying groceries or something like that. And so I'll try and incorporate that element.
Reminds me of the video that Betsy had mentioned that I linked to at the bottom of her video, but I'll do it again on this one, is the video you came up with 2 people side by side, one doing a gym exercise and one doing the activity at home that exercising correlates with. And yeah, a lot of it was picking up the laundry basket from the floor or the groceries up on the top shelf. And yeah, I think that's really been helpful. I've shown it to quite a few others to make them realize why strength training is so important. And yeah, why things that carrying a kettlebell or a dumbbell around in the gym doesn't necessarily feel like it's particularly functional, say, but actually once you put it together with the suitcase story of the luggage, it just suddenly makes total sense.
Yeah, so many real life scenarios that I think many older adults don't have a lot of confidence in, or maybe even shy away from, that resistance training, higher intensity exercise will make those activities more approachable for them.
Next bit I wanted to come on to was some of the misconceptions and the barriers that you often see people have when they first get started. And one of the ones that came to mind just then when you were talking was, we've mentioned deadlifts quite a lot, and not just older adults, all ages. I often have people coming in saying, "I go to the gym, but don't worry, I don't do deadlifts because I know they're bad for my back." Or I know so and so did a deadlift and they really hurt their back doing them, so I'm be scared of them. I don't do them. Do you find particularly deadlifts that's a common thing, or is there a lot of fear around some of the exercises and the idea of doing them with weights? And if someone is watching this or listening and has a similar fear, what would you say to that person?
I'd say deadlifts are the most common, and to that person that is concerned, like I always acknowledge that people do hurt their back doing some type of, it could be deadlifts, it could be lots of different exercises too. It's always hard to like pinpoint, oh, it was that movement, right? Or was it that you didn't get enough sleep the night before and you've been incredibly stressed and your body is just not in a great spot to handle load in general. But to those individuals, yeah, that can happen. But if you can do that movement with a coach or a physio that knows deadlifting to build up your resilience in that movement, that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And think of all the things where we have to lift relatively heavy weight from the ground. The Amazon boxes, the dog food at the grocery store, the soil, at the garden store, the grandkid, you know, the baby picking up off the ground. I mean, all the things, right, that we can make those activities a little bit easier and safer for you by training this movement. And being very calculated about it, whether it's technique, whether it's kind of the jumps and weight, but it's a very safe movement. And if you avoid the movement, that's going to make all these other important activities harder for you and probably increase your risk of an injury if you avoid it. So deadlifts are definitely common. I'd say number two after that is kneeling. Work with a lot of folks that have had a knee replacement or just haven't been on the ground in a long period of time. A lot of folks that, especially with having knee surgery, knee replacements, that weren't explicitly told or shown how to kneel and get on the ground after their surgery, that a lot of folks can kind of go on with life assuming that it's bad for their surgery and the equipment. And that's just not the case. And so exposing people to kneeling in an inviting manner, meaning that there's padding on the ground, that we may give some arm assistance so they don't have to put all their weight on their knee, but just a little bit, and gradually increase that pressure, that can lead to them being able to get to and from the ground, for example, with confidence. And so kneeling, I'd say, is a close number two after deadlifts in terms of concern and fear about an exercise. And when I say kneeling, that's a part of what we've talked about before, right? Getting to and from the ground and some of the learning how to fall techniques. So that's usually a part of those other movements.
I think with the deadlifts, it reminded me of a quote from Brett Contreras of, if you think lifting weights is dangerous, try being weak. Being weak is dangerous.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good quote. And that's all I saw in home health, like that preventable suffering, like I mentioned, like that. I saw the danger of being weak and deconditioned, and just that long suffering, the dying slow that so many folks experience, and to know that we can do something about it in almost every case. I think that definitely gives me a lot of motivation to go that route.
And I suppose your explanation just then brings us back to the 1 rep max living. Is if picking up your grandchild is 90% max effort, then it's not going to take much to push you over the edge to then cause a reaction in the back. Whereas actually, if you've lifted double the weight in the gym for 5 reps, suddenly lifting your grandchild is a lot easier, and you've built that buffer again, and it brings you all back to that kind of that loop back to start.
Yeah, it's easier physically and then mentally too. Like I think it's so many people that they go to pick the grandkid up, and deep down they're like, man, I hope I don't flare my back up. I don't have to, hope I don't, go back to where I was, a year ago when they had a back injury. That you can do that with confidence and knowing that your body can handle what life's going to throw at it.
And then we've talked about a few sort of throughout the whole conversation of objections that people tend to have, or kind of myths they've heard, or misconceptions around strength training. Is there anything else that springs to mind of things that puts people off getting started that you wanted to sort of try and challenge that viewpoint of someone?
I often there will be a conversation or concern around weight and gaining weight, and then also gaining quote unquote too much muscle. So I'll hear a lot of folks like, well, I don't want to get too bulky and whatnot. And so I think that is starting to die down, hopefully, that whole premise. But for those that are concerned about getting too bulky, the first point is I don't think people realize how hard you have to train and how much you have to eat to support muscle growth to the point of becoming bulky. Like I always use myself as an example. I'm I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. I'm a relatively like lanky kind of guy, and I've absolutely busted my tail over the past 10, 11 years to gain muscle. It is so hard to gain muscle, and I'm definitely not this muscular bulky dude. Like I look more like an endurance athlete or runner than anything. And so it is very, very hard for someone to get bulky. And so I usually start there, that you probably don't need to be concerned about that. And then from the weight standpoint, people will sometimes see weight gain, right, when they start to train weight, because they're gaining more muscle mass. But as we all know, that the benefits of that far outweigh whatever you see on that scale. And that if someone just focuses on weight, they will often miss all the other components or variables that are improving, right? Like you can go up in weight on the scale, but then also you may start to see a decrease in your waist circumference, for example, or your pant size. And just see so many folks focus on the scale that they are like using that as this all encompassing health metric, when it is not that helpful. Like you building more muscle is going to be the best thing that you can do for your health, not focusing so much on that scale.
Yeah, I see that, and the fear of becoming bulky is one that I hear a lot as well. And like you say, it's just so tough to do, and it's not going to happen accidentally by doing 2 or 3 workouts for 20-30 minutes per week.
And if it does happen, what's the downside? Right? I mean, it may not be an aesthetic that you're looking for, but going back to 1 rep max living, strength, bone mineral density, like, oh my gosh, like the benefits to that are tremendous, right? And the cons are very minimal, if any, right? And I think it's a lot of cultural context related to that for sure. But I would love to get bulky. My wife really wants to get bulky too. So,
Great. I thought it'd be a nice way to finish if you can think of anyone off the top of your head. But you've kind of told us a little bit about the trip and your group being able to get the bag in the overhead bins. And is there any other stories or any sort of standout kind of success story of someone that you can think of that from where they started to the benefits they've made, just to kind of open the idea up to people of actually what is possible, some of the improvements? And we've heard it through stories on the podcast, but is there anyone else that stands out to you?
Man, there's so many. There's some relatable ones and not so relatable ones. I mean, a very relatable one is on that retreat. We had someone that had 2 knee replacements, had heart surgery, as they've been a member in our gym, and they were an avid equestrian growing up. They had never, they spent so much time on the back of a horse growing up, and once they hit around 40, they had a really, really difficult time getting up on that horse, and they stopped the thing that they loved. And it was a big part of her life. And she'd been with us for a few years, and she's very regular in the gym and was seeing some amazing results. And we were on that retreat, and she rode a horse on the beach for the first time ever on the beach in this idyllic setting. But I look over at her, and I was riding right beside her, and she just starts crying, just tears going down her face of seeing the fruit of her labor, but then also this huge part of her life that she thought was a thing of the past is now in the present. And from that, she's taken trips, riding horses in different places, and just opened up a whole new part of her life that she thought was dead and gone. And that I hope that resonates with folks, because we all have that activity, right, that we thought we'd never do again, but it may be more within our grasp than what we realize.
Oh, amazing. I bet that was amazing to see and rewarding for you as well.
Yeah, there wasn't a dry eye within 20 feet of her in that moment.
Great. Well, I think that leaves a perfect note for us to finish on, because I'm quite conscious we've gone over the hour mark now, and I could
love it.
Talk for another half hour at least of some other areas. But I suppose if people did want to learn more about you or sort of see the things you're doing, if you've got any places you can point them towards, as social media, etc.
Yeah. My Instagram, I'm pretty active on there, dustinjones.dpt. That is a lot of content that's geared towards clinicians and coaches. But if you are wanting to learn more, that could be a great place as well. But just know it's geared towards, physios, strength coaches. And then in terms of the clinic and gym that I have, it's -60.com, hyphen60.com. And that is our awesome little spot that we have here in Georgetown, Kentucky, for folks over 60.
Right, and I say I'll link to all of those in the show notes, the episode. But yeah, for now, I'll let you get on with the rest of your day, and really appreciate you coming on to talk to us. And yeah, there's a lot I'm sure people will take from that, and hopefully you've inspired some others to get started if they've not already.
Awesome. I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Yeah, take care.